Coming up on More Than Before.
Today, choose what you want to be known for when you leave, because you will be known for something. It's whether you choose to be intentionally known for something or not that makes the difference.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we have a rock star on the show. She is just absolutely amazing. I absolutely love her. She left her corporate job to start her own business that has found incredible success in coaching and training. She is truly spectacular. She has a huge heart for people, and she's really good at getting people to act. And that's why she is the action coach. She's a wife. She's a mother. She has amazing children who are doing some pretty cool stuff. And not only that, the most important thing is she is my good friend. Heather Marquez, how are you doing today? So good to have you on the show.
I am doing fabulous. And can I just say, I'd love to just grab you and take you everywhere to do every intro for me from now on. Thank you so much.
I don't know why. I had a feeling that you were going to say, could you just follow me around like in the grocery store? And here comes Heather Marquez coming down
Wouldn't
to
that be
get her
sweet?
mushrooms. These mushrooms are the best mushrooms because she's picked them out by hand.
I love it. Not only could I use my own theme music, I could have my own MC or announcer. Yes.
I think this might be a brand new area that I should start going into, emceeing people's lives. Oh my goodness. We've known each other for a while, but even as we were just talking a little bit ago, when I think of you, I think of our time, it feels like it was just the other day, but it was years ago where you and I were in Minneapolis. We were at this retreat, trying to figure out who we are and how to show up. And I don't even think I really even knew why I was there. I think I signed up and I was like, this is really good. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And I got to meet some amazing people, and you're one of those people. And we got to spend some time walking around an arboretum.
Mhm.
I didn't even know what an arboretum was until I went to Minneapolis. And it was so much fun to walk around, to kind of be in a space, to have someone really hear you. And I think that's something that you're really good at doing, hearing people, hearing their heart, and being able to convey that in such a way that helps them to transform their life. So we could go in a lot of different places from this point, but I think maybe the best thing to do is to say, what are you doing right now? Like what is exciting in your life? What's going on? What do you spend most of your time doing right now?
I'm doing lots of things, some of them in my business, some of them for nonprofit, of course, a mom. So in my business, I'm really excited lately about making this strong pivot towards business owners who are really big thinkers. I'm not talking about your average big thinker, but like I want to change my industry type big thinkers. And I've had so much fun with them brainstorming the next steps and overcoming obstacles and figuring out what that looks like and hashing out their vision and then helping them come up with a plan to get there. That has been probably one of the most fun things that I have done lately. And I realized through those business owners that, wow, those are the people I love working with, the ones that have such a huge vision that everybody else around them is sort of skeptical or thinking, okay, you're a little bit crazy.
Mm.
But once we talk through it, we can see the path, which is super, super exciting. Lots of leadership development with those teams as well, process development, but the brainstorming process and the pulling the vision out into a more concrete thing for them has been really exciting.
I love that. And don't we need someone to be able to pull those things out to make it concrete? I think there are people in our life that can pull things out of us and then they just kind of float away. So
Yeah.
I think that's what's really cool about what you do is there is action that takes place. There's a plan that gets laid out for people to have a really clear vision. So you grew up in Waterloo, Iowa, correct?
Muscatine, Iowa. Still
Muscatine,
Iowa. Yeah.
but you're,
Muscatine.
well, not too far away. It's only like
No,
an
couple
hour and a
hours.
half away, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't get very far from home.
I did not. And that is really because of my value of family. I have such a great support system. My dad was had a lot of siblings, so we had a really big family on that side. My mom was one of eight, and one of the things that I grew up really appreciating is family connection. we would have Thanksgivings where my mom would invite her entire side of the family and my dad's entire side of the family. We'd have 30 or 40 people, and it would be nothing to have that many people in our house for Thanksgiving. And so even when I first started getting transferred in my retail career, my first place to get transferred to was my dad's hometown, so that I was still surrounded by family and had that little bit of comfort level. And
Mm,
then it worked out as my career progressed to get transferred to Waterloo. And from there, I just had a lot of opportunities that kept me in Waterloo, but still close enough with family so that I could engage and show up to the family events. And
mm.
that's one of the things that my husband and I have in common is that family value, which I
Yeah.
will say wasn't always quite as clear to me when I was in the retail industry before I had kids. I maybe wasn't quite as compassionate as I could have been with people who had family emergencies. But once I had kids, I really got it. I understood the importance of having those people around you that you could lean on when you needed to, and that
Mm.
you could just be yourself and have a sense of familiarity with.
So grew up in a big family, and that's also interesting to me too, because early on, your mom was a single parent, right?
Yeah. So the way that sort of shook out was my mom had gotten married, and to I always call it my biological other half. And when she was pregnant with my brother, she ended up making the decision for a lot of reasons to separate. And my biological other half never really had any contact with us, never contributed anything, just sort of was okay with us going. And so she was
Hmm.
pregnant with me, and we're with my brother, and I was about 2 at that point. And then when I was in kindergarten, she met her soulmate, which is who I really call my dad. And he is just this amazing guy and brought this amazing family with him. And one of the most exciting moments of my childhood was being adopted by him legally, so that there was no way that I was anybody else's kid but his.
Mm.
And he was such a great man. He passed about 16 years ago, but he was such a great man and brought with him such a great family that I absolutely love and adore, and am very blessed to be a part of.
Wow. How old were you when he legally adopted you?
Gosh, I think I was about, let's see, I think I was 7 when they got married. So it probably would have been shortly after that, maybe
Okay.
around 8. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. So, not really having a fatherly figure in your life early on, but then having that transition to having one from 7 years old on. I'm curious because I mean, a lot of kids nowadays, because a lot of homes are split.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I think there really is something to be said about having a really strong parent figure as a mother and a father that really helps a child be able to navigate the world well. I'm curious, what was your take like on who you were prior to having your dad there? And then how did that maybe change after you had a father figure in your life that was, I mean, permanent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we lived next door when I was before my mom met my dad. We lived next door to my grandfather. And so I had 4 uncles and my grandfather, and my mom was very close to her brothers. And so they were very strong in my life. My aunt's husbands, my godfather was one of them, was very strong in my life. My grandfather played a huge role as a father figure. But
Mm.
part of it was my mom was just an incredibly strong woman and did whatever it took to make sure that we were provided for. And I remember, the biggest change when my dad came into the picture was an up-leveled sense of security for
Mm.
us, because there was now that other provider. And my dad was this hulking figure of a man, but really a soft, squishy teddy bear inside. But there was just no way that you could be around him and not feel safe unless you were on the receiving end of his temper. And which I was, his little girl. So I really didn't get that often. But he also brought so much joy and humor. He had the most incredible ability to tell stories in a way that entertained and always brought the humor. And I just remember, you know, my dad was, so a little bit of a background. My dad was maybe a little rough around the edges and had been into some trouble in his youth. And his family credited my mom for saving him and getting him out of trouble and stabilizing everything. And then, I sort of credit him for bringing both of our families together, because he was that people person that was the common thread, because everybody loved him.
Mm,
And when he passed and we were at his funeral, there were so many people that came up to me and said, because of your dad, I'm here today. If it wasn't for your dad, I would have
mm,
been dead, or I'd be in prison, like all these things, which I had no idea about all that stuff happening because I was too little. But it really gave me a sense of legacy. And
mm,
you get to pick what you're known for. And my dad, intentionally or not, was known for this person that saved a lot of people and got them opportunities. And my mom was the person who really saved him. And so it
wow.
was this fascinating mix. But yeah, he was just a tremendous character. And you couldn't help but not love him. He would walk into a grocery store full of strangers and have five best friends by the time he left. And so there was just that different dynamic that he brought, an example, because my mom is pretty reserved and quiet. She's all heart and she'll take care of everybody, but she is definitely not the bigger than life character that my dad was. And
Mm.
so I got to see both of those play out and balance each other and support each other in navigating the world together.
So who were you as a child? Were you reserved? Were you outgoing? I know, I like how you said, you didn't directly say this, but you could do no wrong in your father's eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like what kind of child were you? Were you the adventure type? Were you more of the? I mean, I know you now,
Yeah.
and I see you as the adventure type. I think most people would kind of see you that way, but I think there's some reservedness in there. And I'm
Hmm.
curious, who was Heather as a kid, and how has that kind of changed throughout your life?
Yeah. I was super reserved as a kid. I felt like when my mom, when it was just her, I was sort of the second mom to my brother, because she was juggling multiple jobs and two roles, the role of both parents. And so when she wasn't around, or even when she was, I was trying to help out and sort of be that second mom to my brother. So I grew up with a really strong sense of responsibility. A lot of people always termed me as being a really old soul because of that. I tended to be pretty serious, although I'm very quirky and carry that quirkiness forward. But all about the A's, all about getting things right. However, I was also very much a tomboy. We grew up in a more rural area. So, playing in the mud or in the fields was nothing. Coming home, completely covered in whatever, it was no big deal. We had gardens, we did yard work, we rode tractors. So very much a tomboy, didn't like anything girly or frilly. As a matter of fact, I have pink on now. When I was a kid, you couldn't get me in anything ruffled or pink to save my life. But throughout my journey, one of the things that has happened for me is I have become much more comfortable and in touch with every aspect of who I am. And
Mm,
my confidence level has changed dramatically. And I would say even over the last 5 to 10 years, it has changed dramatically from what it was even back then. But once I joined the John Maxwell team, at that point, that's what it was called, the Maxwell leadership team, I really started embarking on a path of self-discovery,
mm,
which the Paul Sheely event was part of that, where we walked and talked, and have invested a lot of time and energy in just figuring out who I am, who I want to be. One of my mentors one time told me, when you get to a building and you're a new leader in a building, you get that first day to choose what you want to be known for. And then every decision, every action you do going forward has to support that. So
mm,
today, choose what you want to be known for when you leave, because you will be known for something. And it's whether you choose to be intentionally known for something or not that makes the difference. And I've just carried that with me, especially over the last 10 years, in helping shape and define who I am. And the death of my father made a pretty big impact in in that. I realized that he was sort of my safe harbor, my rock, and
Mm,
it shook my world losing that. And I didn't realize how much I depended on that for my sense of security and safety. And then
mm,
I sort of transferred that a little bit to my husband. And I've realized over time, my mom set a pretty incredible example of being independent, self sufficient when she had to be in those early years. And there was no reason that I couldn't do that too. And, still married, very much love my husband. He's a great guy. But I also have a very strong sense of independence, which I always hope filters into my children as well. And that sense of independence has built over time and the confidence in what I do. Now, to be
mm,
fair, part of my confidence has come along with my clients' successes. When I have a win with them, when they have a win because of something we've done, it you can't help but not feel more confident about what you do and what you bring to the table.
mm,
But the other piece of that is living more authentically into who you are meant to be. And coaching and training is what I was put on the planet for. Seeing the potential in people and holding the space and the belief in them until they build it for themselves is absolutely 110% why I'm here. And when I get to do that, I can't help but feel more confident, more encouraged about the future, and like I'm being the best version of me.
mm. Your father played such a huge pinnacle role in your life, especially, as you say, he was that safe harbor. He was your rock. And there's, I've met a lot of people who've gone through loss, and there's the stages of grief, and everyone has their way of processing things, and everyone's different. But I'm curious for you, what was the point for you? And maybe this is something that you're still working on, even though it was so many years ago that your father passed. I'm curious, what was that transitional shift for you of going from maybe mourning who he was to be able to celebrate who he was and remember, because you have, like, when you talk about your dad, you light up, even to this day.
Yeah.
And it's not like, when someone passes right away, there's a sadness inside because they're no longer present physically. But
Mhm.
then I think as time goes on, you realize that it was never, I mean, it's nice to have them there physically, but there's also a spiritual, mental, logical part to going, well, they're still here, the things that they taught me are still here. The legacy piece that you were talking about, that your father kind of challenged you with after his passing. I'm curious for you, what did that transition look like for you, to be able to shift from the mourning piece to be able to celebrate all the things that your father has left you with, and being able to do that on a daily basis of where you are.
That has been such an incredible journey. So my father passed really unexpectedly, and true to who I am, when I found out, I went into just pure business mode. How do I ensure that my mom is protected and taken care of through all of this? How do I make sure that everything gets done the way it should get done and that we're honoring my dad's memory? And I think in my family, there was a lot of like, wait a minute, did she not care? Why, how can she be so logical and just be so businesslike? But it was at that moment, my safety of let's get things done. It was very comforting for me to just be able to have that movement. And when the dust settled, um, I really felt inconsolable for a long time, and I thought that I, after a while, had it under control. But what I didn't realize was, even though I thought I had it under control, I was taking it out on those around me,
Mm,
in a pretty rough way. My team could feel it. My husband, his parents, they could all feel this thing. And finally, my husband sat down with me and he said, "Look, you've become a beast to live with. You are so angry and so frustrated, and you're resentful." And part of it was, I had resentment that his mom had her husband and my mom didn't, and he had his dad and I didn't, and I didn't understand, why there's all these bad people in the world, and my dad, who made all these contributions, got taken from us early, and all these bad people are still out there. And so
mm,
there's all this swirl of stuff happening in me. And he said, this can't go on. Your team is frustrated, and you're just alienating and pushing everybody away. And I'm like, no, I'm just getting things done. He's like, but the intensity that you are diving into everything is becoming unmanageable for those around you.
Mm.
And so he actually set up counseling and drove me to the first counseling session and went with me. And I got counseling. And I have to say that was the best thing that anybody could have ever done.
Mm.
Getting professional help to deal with that, because that's how I started to realize that my dad represented my sense of safety and my safe harbor. I remember when 9/11 happened, the first thing I did was called my dad to say, okay, what's going on? And then he reassured me that it was going to be okay. And I didn't have that anymore.
Mm.
So it's been this long journey of evolving. And one of the things that I've done is I have a couple of pieces of memorabilia of my dad's, like his hard hat from work. Somebody wrote this really beautiful story about him, funny story about him that I have hanging in my house and every once in a while look at. And I have pictures of him. And whenever I'm around his side of the family, I ask them to share stories so that
Mm.
he's still alive with us in our memories. But I also have the opportunity to take things that I learned and bring them to the table. And I'll say my appreciation for the word legacy really wasn't there until this
Mm.
happened. And so I now know part of the purpose behind this was, at that point, I was still in the corporate rat race in the retail world. And it was for me to be courageous and step into my own legacy. And so it really has been a journey. And there are definitely moments where I want to cry or I'm sad and I miss him terribly. But I also know that somewhere he's always there and he loved me and was proud of me. Even if we didn't get to say those things at the end, we just had that kind of relationship. And
Mm.
so I find comfort in that. The other thing is perspective. I had a young lady that worked for me and she lost her father at 18. And that meant that she was never going to get to have him walk her down the aisle. And I got that with my dad. And I, was upset that he never got to see my kids be born or grow up. But I know he's watching from someplace, and at least he got to walk me down the aisle. And there are so many people out there that don't have that. Their parents got ripped away from them way too early, or they don't even have great parents that would do that with them. And
Mm.
that gave me the perspective that the time that he was in my life was a gift. And I need to appreciate that and
Mm.
continue to honor his memory of bringing joy and laughter and helping my family have a feeling of safety versus commiserating at the loss, because that doesn't get us anywhere. And
Yeah.
yes, you do have to grieve. Hear me clearly on that. But there's a point where you have to realize that you have to move forward and you can't feel guilty anymore for laughing knowing that they're gone and they can't laugh, or for going to a great restaurant and knowing they can't go with you, because there's all that guilt too, that
Mm.
how could I possibly be laughing when I just lost my dad?
Mm.
And the stories that people would tell me about him, I couldn't help but laugh, those days following the funeral. And it made me realize that he's just always going to be there in those stories.
Mm. And there's kind of this piece of losing someone teaches you to cherish every single moment, especially someone that's really close to you. You start to get not, I almost want to say heaviness, but it's not a heaviness. It's an urgency to make sure that every single moment and the words that you speak and how you show up, that you're intentional with those. And that doesn't mean that everyone who loses someone, even that they're close with, are going to have that sense of urgency. But it is an option that people have to take those moments and to say, man, right now, I want to live in the opportunity, because your father was such a huge piece of your life. Like, for those of you guys that are listening right now, like, you can tell that he was a huge part. And not only that, he wasn't just a huge part in her life, in the lives of hundreds of people. And when you start to take that perspective, you start to go, well, how am I showing up? What is my legacy? How do I play in every single day to make the most of the time that I have? You briefly mentioned your time in retail, which is funny to me because it was not brief by any stretch of the
No.
imagination. You had 25 years in the retail industry. What brought you to retail, and what part did that play in your life and kind of developing who you are? Was that kind of I would almost imagine that part of your life was maybe the go part of your life where you learned to put your head down and to just attack things. That's almost like the breeding ground of the action coach, of where you kind of cut your teeth, I would almost assume. What
Yeah.
was retail to you?
So I started my career as a 16-year-old cashier at Walmart. And I remember, getting the call that I got the job, and I was on vacation with my family. And my family really believed in a very strong work ethic. And they wanted me to come in right away to start the onboarding process. And I was like, I got to go. And I left vacation to go be onboarded as a cashier. And about 2 months into my illustrious retail journey, which spanned about 2.5 decades, I was given the keys by my store manager, and he said, "Hey, your supervisor called off. You're in charge of the front of the store, all the cashiers. Make sure that all the registers get counted down and everybody gets a break. If you need anything, call me. I'll be back in my office." And I was like, woohoo, I got the keys. And I thought this was this really exciting moment. But what I realized was I only got the keys because I learned really fast and I was very effective at what I was doing.
Mm.
I was no nonsense, get the job done. And so felt like he could trust me. But it wasn't too long into that. I did decent the first night. And so, I had supervisors that kept calling in. I kept getting thrown the keys. And then I realized one night, as I was sort of assaulted back by the time clock, that I'd pushed somebody a little bit too far and been a little bit intense with them, and that maybe there was a little bit more to this leadership thing than what I thought. And
Mm.
that started my awareness of how I needed to show up different and what a leader really was. And so over the course of the years, I worked hard, got promoted, worked hard, got promoted, and ended up spending a lot of time in various stores helping to solve problems, dig out of messes, that kind of thing, until I got transferred up to Waterloo with Walmart. And then I was recruited by Kohl's. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned in that process of being recruited was, I had a great career at Walmart. I was highly promotable, had a great reputation. And Kohl's wanted me to come and basically start from scratch with them.
Mm.
And I was like, gosh, that's a lot to give up. And every time I would say, go back to my boss and say, hey, I have this offer, they would say, okay, we'll match it. And then I'd go back to the recruiter and they would say, okay, we'll up level it here. And it was this thing where the one was always willing to match, but the other one was always willing to step out and do
Mm.
more because they saw that value in me. And it was a huge awareness that I had a lot more value than I had given myself credit for up to that point. And so I made the big decision to jump ship and go to this other retailer. And it was such an adventure, and at first a very humbling experience, because I came from a juggernaut of a retail corporation that was spanning globally at that point and moved to a regional company. And so the technology was different, the processes, the systems, and the ego that I had about how good I was there when I came over, that got shook a little bit because everything was different and I couldn't operate the same way. I didn't know all the background or all the terminology that they used. So it felt a little bit like starting over and
Mm.
having to reprove myself. And eventually got promoted to store manager, which was also another great trial by fire. One day I was the HR operations manager, and the next day I just moved myself into the next office and I was the store manager. And that was pretty much how it went. I had a new title. And there were so many lessons and journeys, but soon after I became a store manager, my boss there said, "Hey, I'd like for you to be the district trainer." And I was like, "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, I want you to do the continuing education for the executives in our district." And I thought, why me? Why would you pick me? I'm the newest store manager. How is that going to look? And he's like, "Just trust me, do this." And I said yes. And that became a 10-year journey of facilitating learning and lifting leaders up. And I really was able during that time, my father passed away, to embrace the whole legacy thing, because my mentality became, I want people to say, because of Heather, I dot 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 and did something great or got promoted or whatever. And that became such a driving force for me through my career that I then eventually had the opportunity to join the John Maxwell team. And it gave me the confidence through those years of retail to really understand the impact I could have, the results I could drive. And that helped me jump and, in the eternal words of Paul Martinelli, jump and build my wings on the way down with my business.
Now, not to assume this, but when you were in retail, what were you chasing? Were you chasing the title? Were you chasing the power? Were you chasing like the next? Like, what was the thing that motivated you to continue moving to the next thing? What I mean, I was just talking to someone recently, and they were so honest, and I loved it because I said, what caused you to want to keep getting bigger? And it's like, well, I made more money. I want to make more money.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different motivation. I'm curious, what was your motivation that you were chasing after when you were in the retail space?
Honestly, it was about proving myself. So way back when I
Mm.
started as that 16-year-old kid, I've have been very lucky. Now that I'm older, I realize it's luck. I look younger than what I am. And so when I was 16, at most I looked like I was 12. And when I was 25, I barely looked like I was 16. I'm pretty petite, lighter colored hair. So people didn't take me seriously for a really long time because I looked so young, because I was so small. I was in a very male dominated industry and I was female. And so I always felt like I had to work way harder than everybody else to prove myself. And the way I was going to do that was driving results, being the
Mm.
best, getting the best numbers, being number one. And so that proving that I can do it was a huge motivating factor for me. Anytime somebody would say, well, you're too young or you haven't been here enough or whatever, that just spurred me on to prove them wrong essentially, and get results that knocked it out of the park. And then they couldn't argue anymore that I was too whatever they wanted to attach to it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you really are a driver. I mean, it's funny, my wife is petite too, 4'10" and a half, 4'11" and a half. Again, don't get those
Yeah,
wrong.
don't be taking those inches off.
I'll get run over. I'm gonna lose a leg tonight. Take me out by the legs. But like there is something to be said that if you're like petite, whether you're a man or a woman, if you're petite, it almost feels like you need to dial up the notch a little bit to make sure you're larger than life, that you can stand with the rest of everyone around you. I don't know what that is specifically,
It's a
but
thing.
you have been a runner since I've known you, like for the past 5, 6, 7 years, being part of Maxwell leadership. You started volunteer wise, if I'm not mistaken, and moved yourself. I mean, I think you're still kind of volunteer, but you manage a large portion during live events, and
Yeah.
you carry a ton of weight on your shoulders. I see you running around all the time when I'm at one of those events, and you go 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 go. You're the go girl, right? action coach, the go girl. And
Yes.
but when we met in Minneapolis, there was a moment. It's funny because everyone that I know that went to that event, we were all goers. Like we were all
Mhm.
move at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And for us to be walking around an arboretum, which by the way, we've said arboretum a number of times. Essentially, it's a large garden. It's a
Yeah.
public garden that you can just walk through to enjoy the flowers. Um,
Yes.
some of you are listening right now are just going, why would you ever want to do that? And that is
It's
pretty
very
much
zen.
what
Yeah.
Heather and I feel. Why would you
Yes.
ever just take a walk through a flower garden?
Yeah.
That's
Where are
not
we
getting
going?
anything
Where?
done.
What's the destination point? Can we walk faster to get there?
Yeah, what's the purpose of this thing? What are
Yeah.
we like? And so there was a moment where we were paired up into groups. You and I were walking around, and I don't remember specifically what we were talking about, but I remember that we were going slow. In fact, I believe we were actually late getting
Yeah.
back to where we were supposed to be, because we started to actually slow down. We learned to pause. And I know recently you were talking to someone and the question of solitude came up, and you started saying you got to get some solitude. And I would love for you to talk into that. What is solitude? And for the go-getter, for the person, the guy, the gal that wants to get out and just grab life by the horns and run it till it's in the ground, why is it important to seek solitude and to slow down and pause?
That is such a beautiful question. So I'll give you a little backstory to why I understand solitude and why it's so important. So last year, I started this whole bucket list book that I found. And in my bucket list, I had a week on a beach all by myself and a week in the woods by like a lake or a pond all by myself. And I was sharing these things with my husband, and he was a little bit upset that that was all by myself and he wasn't included. And I said, sometimes we all need time where we're not responsible for another human being.
Mm,
And my example of that was, for example, I don't sometimes want to have to ask the question, how is it possible that you didn't pack any pants in your suitcase for this trip? Or, wait, underwear is one of the most crucial things, and you're telling me that none of them made it in your suitcase? Yes, those are real conversations that as a mom I have had. And so the whole premise was I just want to take some time where I'm not responsible for anybody.
mm,
So he was super gracious and said, for your birthday, why don't you take a weekend? So it became known in my family as my me weekend. And I took some craft stuff and some work stuff and just a variety of things. But I got a hotel room that overlooked nature. And I really only left once because I brought some food with me to go out to eat. Otherwise, I walked, I created, I journaled, I just zoned out, I thought, I planned, like all these things. And I came out of that as a person who was so much clearer and so rejuvenated about everything. And
mm,
it was because I shut out all the noise and I got back in touch with my creative side. I used to draw when I was younger and I hadn't done it for years. I'm not saying I'm any good, but just that whole putting a pencil to paper and trying again was such a great experience. And decorating my sketchbook of all things was just really relaxing.
mm,
And from that, I realized that was one of the things I learned at that event was the power of going inside. And I remember at that event, we were told to go outside and find some area and look at it for like 10, 15 minutes and just stare at it. And I remember looking at a tree. And at first, I was like, all right, there's a tree and there's some tree bark. Okay. But by the time I got done with that exercise, I could see the different shades of the moss and the bark and all the ants and different bugs and where there were some little holes. It was incredible. I even saw like shapes and designs in the bark. I had never hit pause long enough to do something like
mm,
that, which created such an awareness of being present. And that me weekend really did that for me. And then recently I was able to sort of have a me week, if you will. And it was great because I just had quiet time to think about where I'm at and take inventory and where do I want to go? And no matter where your journey leads you, if you don't have clarity around where you want to go, then any decision is going to be fine because it's going to get you wherever and that's where you're thinking. But if you have a
mm,
specific journey you want to be on, a destination or a vision you want to accomplish, you've got to have clarity around that so that you can look at where you're at and where you want to be and start to fill in those gaps. And a lot of times the gaps are less about material things, but more about working on ourselves. I
mm,
remember when I first started my business, I wanted to build a thriving coaching training business, but I wasn't public speaking. And I was really nervous about being in front of people and public speaking. And I needed to show up bolder. But through another activity I had done, I realized I had a limiting belief that I wasn't valuable enough to be visible. Well,
Hmm.
that's crazy and completely wrong. But I had bought into it. So I was a shrinking violet and I kept shrinking back, thinking, why isn't my business growing? But nobody knew who I was. Well, I needed to be bolder. I needed to be more confident. I needed to be courageous and step out of my comfort zone, essentially getting comfortable with being uncomfortable for my business to go anywhere. And we don't have those awarenesses unless there's some intentionality around it. And I find solitude, where you're not hearing anybody else's voice about you and what you should or shouldn't do. You're not shackled by anybody else's expectations, but you just get to sit with you and go inside, is so incredibly eye-opening
Hmm.
and beneficial. Now, solitude can look a little different. So for me, yep, I did have my electronic devices, but I used them to listen to music, things like that. And then at night I would watch some show that was completely mindless and I didn't have to think about anything. But I found joy in.
Hmm.
One of my clients is looking at the whole solitude thing now, and he's looking at going completely device free, which I'm super excited about. But he's very go 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 as well. And he's like, I don't know how I could do that. What do you do? I'm like, well, you think, but what do you think about? I said, okay, so here's my best advice. Have a list of questions. What are things that you want clarity on, things you want answers to? And bring that with you. Bring a journal with you and then pick a question and just sit with that question for a while. So be intentional about that solitude time, because it could feel, for somebody who is a go-getter or on the move all the time, very frustrating and like the longest moments of your life, because you're like, when is this over? When is this over? I feel like that when I'm meditating. But if you're intentional with those questions, it's amazing at where your mind, which is the most incredible biological supercomputer, takes you. It's incredible to experience the clarity and the awarenesses that you get about your journey. Just even taking a few minutes to think about, what lessons have I learned this year? Or even a question that I've been trying to ask myself: what lessons was I supposed to learn this year, but haven't learned? So now I'm going to repeat stuff. Like, maybe that's the question I need, because sometimes I may not catch on as quickly and have to hear it a couple times. But I think the intentionality when you're going to pick something around solitude, and nature is such an incredible space. The energy in nature is very different. So if you're going to do solitude, if you can be in nature, all the better, all the
Hmm.
better, which was why we went to the Arboretum. We didn't get that at the time, but there was a method to the madness.
There was a method to the madness. Well, getting away from things and being able to, like, we focus on so many different moving things in life. We focus on our phones. We focus on, kids running around if you have kids, or your job, or we're always focusing on something. And I remember it was probably like maybe 6 years ago, I was working with Paul Martinelli, and he gave me a bit of homework, gave me this bit of homework that I had to put a dot on the wall in my living room, and I had to sit and I had to stare at the dot. And I would have to time myself. And the goal was to be able to get, I think it was to 5 or 6 minutes without thinking about anything, just staring at the dot. Like, if you're staring at the dot and you're like, okay, look at the dot. You can't say look at the dot. You can't say dot. Like, you have to literally get rid of everything. And I remember being so frustrated because I couldn't go longer than like 7 seconds. It's like, what is going on? I can't do this. Like I get far and then I'd be like, good job. And I'm like, no, not good. No, you just ruined it. Right. But there's something to be said about getting to a place where you can slow down and you can just stop. In fact, Willow and I, we were just in Colorado not long ago, and we were at this cabin. We're in the middle of nowhere. We don't have cell reception. It was great. And we first got there and she was saying, oh my gosh, like I'm going crazy here. Like, what are we going to do? Like, what's the plan? Go, 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 go. Right.
Mhm.
I married another go person. We're goers. And It was funny because by the end, by like night 3, we're sitting down in front of the fire, and I kid you not, 3-4 hours goes by, and we have literally sat on the couch doing nothing, staring at a fire. And there was something rejuvenating about that, to be able to just stop and be present and to not have to run to the next thing, because we are runners, we are goers. And one of the things that I love about what you were just talking about was, we think about clarity for goals and clarity what we need to do in order to get to the next thing. This is what I want for my career, this is what I want for the house, this is what I want for the vacation. And we're really good at creating stuff, we're really good at creating things. And one of the things that could be overlooked really easily about what you said is that you need to spend time creating a vision of who you are. Who you are is incredibly important. In fact, one of the things for you is you had to let go of an identity of who you
Yeah.
were and to embrace a completely different identity that maybe felt foreign to you. Why is it important for someone to stop long enough to redefine who they are versus what they do and what they're going after?
You know, you were so correct on the whole identity thing. When I started my business, I went through a major identity crisis. I went from being the person that was highly respected by my peers and having all the answers for my team all the time and knowing what was next, because I'd cycled through the cycles of retail and all the seasons so often, I could do it in my sleep, to then jumping into this thing where I wasn't the expert. I didn't have all the answers and I needed help, and I wasn't always good at asking for help. I was very prideful. And it was just so identity shaking when all of a sudden you realize, wait, I don't have all the answers. I can't just pull something from my gut because I've experienced this so much. And you have to do the work of learning all this stuff. And as human beings, as we evolve, John Maxwell always says you get a choice. Are you going to repeat 1 year 25 times, or are you going to actually have 25 years of experience? Well, if you don't change who you are, there's no way that you're going to have anything more than 1 year repeated 25 times. It's that internal journey, the learnings as we go, the time spent reflecting on that journey, what we learned, what we still need to learn, and where we want to go, that makes all the difference. And who we are was great, and it got us to where we are in this exact moment. But the reason we're not somewhere else is because we're not the person we need to be in that next spot. And when you're on that journey of figuring out, okay, let's plug it into the navigation system. Here I am in this moment. Where do I want to go? Now you've got to look at all those little paths and figure out which path is for you and what do you need to do differently on those paths. So maybe it's a skill you need to learn. Maybe like myself, it was a limiting belief you need to identify and work on and let go. Maybe it's values that you need to embrace. Part of the reason I changed my career focus and started my own business was because my family values, once I had kids, kicked in so strong that I was no longer living in an alignment with who I was becoming. And that gap between who I wanted to be and who I was being and what the company needed me to be was starting to widen every day. And it got more and more and more uncomfortable until I finally said, okay, I have to make a different decision. Otherwise, I'm not being true to me. Yes, I can get these great results and have this great career, but my husband feels like he's a single parent. My son thinks the only time he gets to eat with me is when he comes to my workplace
Wow.
and has dinner there. Not the truth, but that was his perception. And so we all have a journey we're meant to be on, but unless you know where you're going, it's hard to figure out what do you have to do to get there. And the action steps, I mean, we can do more of the same thing, but a lot of times we have to change our state of being. We have to change something in ourselves to be able to do the things that we haven't been willing to do up until now to get there, because it's going to require something different getting to your vision.
Mm.
And again, the more clear you are on the vision, the easier all this other stuff is. But you have to recognize it's going to be a change. And that also brings a lot of hardship at times for the people around you, because they don't always understand why you're changing and how you're changing. And they love you the way that you are. So they want to keep you safe, and they keep trying to pull you back to be the person you've always been. And so there's a lot of juggling also in this journey about balancing what the people around you need for a sense of safety and security in the relationship, and who you're meant to be and becoming that person. And I have found that through that journey, there are at times relationships that no longer serve me. It doesn't mean that I don't value those people, but I have to change where I'm spending my time, because I don't want to be who I was 10 years ago. I want to be this best version of myself. And that's going to require different inputs and different people
Mm.
around me that I can learn from. So that is another piece of this whole journey that I think can't be underestimated, because probably when I really think about it, that's the hardest part, is how you changing, your evolution impacts the people around you and the relationships that you currently have, and how you navigate that.
Mm. And one of the key pieces I think that's important too, that you briefly mentioned, was the space that you create around you. Like, your son, saying that, oh, I don't feel like I get to have dinner with you. The only time I ever get to eat with you is when I come to your work. And sometimes when we look at the things around us that we're doing, a lot of the times we feel like we need to add something to our life in order to make it better. We've got to add income. We've got to add more activities. We need to add more relationships to our life in order to make our life full, right? And a guest of the show, a while back, he said that the soul grows from subtraction, not addition. And how true that is in our lives, that not only do we need to determine who it is that we want to be, but we also need to create the space in our life to be that person, to create that space for your
Mhm.
family to exist, to create the space for exercise or health, or space to think, even getting your me time, to go out and spend some time with yourself, to say, am I being the person that I was created to be? Man, Heather, it has been so amazing to have you on. I have one more question
Yeah.
before we jump off. But for those of you listening, I really want to encourage you, go check out what Heather is doing. You're going to find all of her links in the show notes here. She is pretty much in every form of social media, but I want you to reach out. I want you to connect with her, because she really has some amazing work that she's doing. And reach out and connect to her if you want someone to help you create action in your life, but also someone that's going to be a partner for you to create the spaces that you need to grow. Reach out. She is absolutely amazing. She's a powerhouse of a woman. She's a good friend of mine. I can't recommend her enough. But with all that being said, your father had a huge legacy. And right now you have two littles that are in
Hmm.
your house. They're moving into the stages where it's kind of like takeoff now. They're
Yeah.
almost at the end of the runway. You're trying to prepare them the best that you can. You're working full time in your job, in your career. You're also helping out with a nonprofit. Like, you are busy. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm curious, what is the legacy that you want to extend forward? Right? Like, our legacies, I don't think our legacies are ever built off of ourselves. It's built off of the person behind us. It's built off of the backs and the shoulders of the people that have propped us up. Your father has been one of those people who has built a ginormous legacy, and it might feel daunting to maybe live up to that legacy, but I'm curious, what is the legacy that you want to build and extend from your father's legacy?
Yeah, that is such an incredible question. And I would say that for me, I want to change the way we think and we lead. Leadership is such an important piece of who I am. And I try every day to incorporate that into everything I do, including with my kids. We have leadership conversations, probably way more than what they want to have with me, but it comes into our conversation all the time. because I really want to have a ripple effect for leaders and change the way we see leadership, change the way leaders show up so that we don't have the disconnections and the lack of community that we're feeling right now. I really want people to have a sense of belonging wherever they are. And that requires great leadership to tap into that and bring people along. So, my legacy hopefully is creating spaces for people to be the best version of themselves where they can show up in a community and help everybody feel valued and like they belong.
Heather, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for jumping on the show. For all of you listening in, I want you to take a moment, write in the comment section. Let us know what your favorite part of the show was. Like this, share this with a friend. As I always say, there's someone in your community, someone in your circle that needs to hear what Heather said today. There were so many golden nuggets. Make sure you share this with someone, because I promise you there's something in here that's going to change the way that they show up in their life. Until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.